Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, taking a fun and interesting video for you guys today, and that is because I am playing Metroid Prime on the newly released Dolphin XR emulator. It is a fork of Dolphin that basically brings better VR support in, and that's definitely something you guys are interested in when I first talked about this project. And just recently, a few days ago, another tool came out called Prime Gun, which gives you full motion controls and something like an Oculus Quest 3. As I move the actual Oculus Quest controller around, that is aiming Samus's cannon right now. And even though none of this is final, it still definitely has some jank, as you can see from the culling on the left hand side of the screen. That's not anything I saw in my headset, and I will say, when this is working, it absolutely is a super immersive experience. But that is with the caveat when it is working, as I will say, in the 30 minutes I captured this, it probably took me 2 hours to actually get it set up and working correctly. And for some strange reason, there was definitely a frame pacing issue in the headset, so it might not have been the most comfortable thing I've ever played. But honestly, it is proof that VR is getting better for Dolphin, and maybe sometime in the future we will have seamless performance here. And just so you know, as a baseline, I have an i9-12900K and a 3080 Ti with 64GB of RAM, so I definitely have a lot of specs on offer here to be able to run these games at a high frame rate. Just seems like sometimes, I don't know if it was texture caching or otherwise, you would get a little bit of hitching. But I will say, being able to move your arm around in real life and have it mirrored up to Samus's arm cannon here absolutely is a level of immersion that I've never experienced in Metroid Prime before. And if this thing consistently ran at like a 72 to 90 frame per second in my Oculus Quest, it definitely would be fun. But I love that you can just smack yourself in the head with an actual arm cannon. It basically is about as close as you can possibly get to feeling like you're in the world of Metroid Prime, until maybe one day Nintendo actually makes a real VR headset and gives us some VR games. But I never expect that to happen, and even though I don't talk about it often on the channel, I do have a bunch of different VR headsets, and I really do love the technology, even if I always feel like it's a year away from being quote-unquote perfect. Now, when I said this took me like 2 hours to actually get running correctly for the capture, what I mean to say is Prime Gun, the utility that actually puts you in control of Samus's arm, that worked perfectly fine for the motion aspect of it, but for some reason when I actually tried to bind every other button to the Oculus 3 controllers, that was when I actually had a bit of an issue. I guess I should call it the MetaQuest 3. It hasn't been the Oculus for a long time, but that's going to be stuck in my memory forever. So once I actually dealt with those conflicts, and it was a PC level thing, not a utility thing, everything worked perfectly and I could navigate the entire world of something like Metroid Prime with those controllers. The only issue is obviously the MetaQuest 3 controllers don't have as many inputs as you could possibly need on something like an actual GameCube controller or anything else you use. You kind of have to be a little bit creative as to how you bind everything up. And you'll see here when you do go into the actual cutscenes, that is when you basically drop out of that full immersion aspect. But that's obviously because Metroid Prime was never meant to be in virtual reality, so you end up in a situation where you do have to see a little bit of a 2D asset basically playing as a big screen in front of you. And you will see here that that heads-up display does not always follow your head tracking whatsoever, and sometimes will be a little bit off alignment. Now, it is possible that there's some sort of codes that I don't know about to actually get this a little bit more buttoned up, but I will say for the most part it's a really fun proof of concept. And as far as how I present these things, yes, I am stretching the image on the x-axis so you can understand closer what it feels like to being in virtual reality, because it can be a little bit of a pain to actually capture this footage. And because I am not a VR channel, maybe there is a more streamlined process out there workflow-wise, but I am not aware of it. I think this was the best presentation for what it was that I was experiencing inside the MetaQuest 3 headset. But just being able to have full aim control in virtual reality, that was really the immersion point here, and that really 100% just worked. It also allows you to play the game and kind of get off some shots that you would not be able to get in 2D, because obviously if you move that arm cannon around in full 360 degrees, you can hit some things where you would normally hit a barrier in front of you or any other object in the game world. So I would say it actually pivots up the gameplay style a little bit more, and it actually has a slightly nicer feel, at least in my opinion. And you'll see here the obvious text overlays. Those are not going to be perfect in VR either, because again, nothing about this was ever designed to be in VR, but I think it does work. Now, taking a look at a clip of this same section, except in 2D obviously, it is a much better looking image because you can push it a lot further in the upscaling department, but it doesn't have the same level of immersion as something like virtual reality does. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me, with this new VR arm cannon mod, how do you feel about this, and is it something you might want to try out? I totally get VR isn't for everyone, you might not even have the equipment for it, but if you do, have you given any sort of Dolphin VR a chance now that there is the Dolphin XR fork? I just want to know who out there is even interested in this topic. Let's do the first soundtrack sample and I'll be right back with a lot more Metroid and virtual reality. Now, obviously, it just sounds like Metroid Prime, and that's because all this game truly is Metroid Prime converted over into virtual reality. But I actually use a big pair of studio headphones that happily fit over top the MetaQuest 3, the same ones I use for editing. So when I have all that audio just being force-fed into my ears, when I'm moving my head around and feeling like I'm in the world of Metroid Prime, and having control of Samus's actual weapon in a full 3D space, the sense of immersion definitely is a lot better with the audio. And don't get me wrong, if you play this thing on something like a 4K OLED television with surround sound and you dial it up to widescreen and up the resolution, it's an absolutely immersive experience as well. But just being able to kind of shoot those bursts out of the arm cannon in that full range of motion with the Oculus Quest controllers in your hands, it's just a sensation that absolutely works. And again, I totally get it. I keep saying Oculus Quest, Meta Quest. You're just going to have to deal with me kind of playing around with both terms because it's just kind of how it pops up into my head. But again, I don't know if I could get through the entire experience of Metroid Prime in virtual reality. For the most part, it ran well, and maybe if I did it in like hour-long bite-sized chunks, I could do it. But this definitely felt like something that if I played for more than an hour, I might start getting a little bit of that VR headache. And again, I'm not sure why I'm getting a little bit of hitching here. Some games hitch and some games don't. But obviously, if I use my actual MetaQuest 3 on my PC via Airlink or even with a wired cable on a modern VR game intended for VR, I can run it with no issues whatsoever. So maybe it's just a thing in Dolphin VR and Dolphin XR where the emulation isn't 100% buttoned up yet, because I will say the documentation on the VR side of things for Dolphin compared to using Dolphin for GameCube or Wii emulation in a 2D aspect is night and day different, and I'm sure as this evolves we're definitely going to get some more information out of it. So it could just be a situation where you can't get this thing 100% running perfectly 100% of the time no matter what spec you have. It could be something that you just can't really force through. But honestly, it's totally a vibe, and it's something that I'm getting more used to and enjoying more. And you'll see here when I talk about getting shots off that you might not be able to actually land if you were in 2D, not playing it in VR here. You can definitely get some shots off that would otherwise be blocked, and that's because as you move your arm and hand up and down within the game world with that MetaQuest 3 controller, you can kind of get a shot off without actually having to go into the first-person aiming mode that the game does provide when you try to do lock-on. So it definitely is a different feel, and honestly, if this thing ran at a consistent frame rate all the time, I think I would definitely prefer this in virtual reality. But it's one of those things, I played Metroid Prime so many times before, getting a slightly different vibe out of it is 100% something that makes the game feel fresh and unique to me. But one more soundtrack sample, 45 seconds, but come back, I've got some more VR footage to show you. And I'll ask you guys if you want to see more VR content on the channel for retro games, because it's definitely something I'm interested in. But enjoy! So yeah, Metroid Prime in VR with Dolphin XR and Prime Gun as an actual tool set definitely works, and it is a very all-encompassing tool. If you push in on the left-hand thumbstick, you're going to get an entire menu, how to adjust everything in the game, but I will say once I actually got it running, the calibration just seemed to be what I needed it to be. But I'm sure if I dial this in more, it's something that would actually work slightly better, but honestly it felt good enough for me that I wasn't going to spend another hour trying to dial everything in to get it 1% more. And that really is the thing about virtual reality, especially in games that were never intended for it. Sometimes you spend more time actually getting it setting up and running correctly than you do actually playing the game, and that was definitely the situation with this video. It basically basically took me 3 hours start to finish to get everything I needed to get to the editing point. And honestly, that is just where VR is with something like Dolphin XR still. You spend more time fiddling around with it than you actually spend playing, but if you like fiddling around and trying to make things work, then maybe that's something that would work for you. But you tell me down below again, is this something you enjoy seeing? I just figured it would be fun because it's an emulation update, and everyone loves emulation news, and I also got to talk about some VR, which I don't usually get to talk about on the channel. But short of that, we're done. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Tell me if you've ever played Metroid Prime in VR, I would be curious. But other than that, we're done. I'm going to keep playing in VR, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.